The candles on my 31st birthday cake flickered in the dim lighting of Romano's Italian restaurant, casting dancing shadows across the disappointed faces of my family. What should have been a celebration had turned into another intervention about my failed career choices. 31 years old, Samantha, my father Robert said, cutting into his veal witut looking at me. When I was your age, I was already running 3 departments at Pacific Industries. My mother Janet nodded in agreement, dabbing her lips with the cloth napkin. Your sister Emma has her own dental practice. Your brother Michael just made partner at his law firm. And you're still playing around with computers. It's not playing around, I said quietly, though I'd had this conversation countless times before. I run a tech consulting business. My older brother Michael laughed, not bothering to hide his condescension. Consulting? Come on, Sam. You fix computers for small businesses. That's not consulting, that's tech support. And there's nothing wrong with tech support, Emma added with false sweetness, but let's be realistic about what it is. I took a sip of wine and said nothing. There was no point in explaining that my tech support business had evolved into something much bigger over the past 5 years. They wouldn't understand, and they'd already made up their minds about who I was and what I was capable of. The point is, Dad continued, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd perfected during his 30-year career in corporate management, you're wasting your potential. You have a computer science degree from Stanford, for crying out loud. You could be working for Google, Apple, Microsoft, real companies with real futures. Instead, Mom chimed in, you're working out of that tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. Honey, we're worried about you. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they worried about my financial stability, I was sitting on a tech empire worth more than their combined lifetime earnings. But explaining that would require revealing the truth about Carter Technologies, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. I'm doing fine, I said simply. Define fine, Michael challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, fine looks like driving a 10-year-old Honda and living in a studio apartment. My living situation suits my needs. Your living situation is embarrassing, Dad said bluntly. Do you know what my colleagues say when they ask about my children? Emma has her practice, Michael has his partnership, and Samantha fixes computers. The words stung, even though I'd heard variations of them many times before. I had deliberately maintained a low profile, partly for security reasons and partly because I wasn't ready to deal with the family dynamics that would inevitably change once they knew the truth. Robert, Mom said gently, placing her hand on his arm. It's her birthday. Which is exactly why we need to have this conversation, Dad replied. 31 is old enough to stop dreaming and start living in reality. Emma leaned forward, her expression earnest. Sam, we love you. That's why this is so hard to watch. You're brilliant, we all know that. But brilliance without direction is just wasted potential. You could get a job at Pacific Industries tomorrow, Dad said. I still have connections there. The IT department is always looking for qualified people. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be stable. Benefits, retirement plan, a real future. I nearly choked on my wine. The suggestion that I should apply for an entry-level position at Pacific Industries, the company I was in the process of acquiring, was so absurd that I couldn't tell if I wanted to laugh or cry. Dad, I appreciate the offer, but don't dismiss it out of hand, he interrupted. I know the current IT director, Marcus Thompson. Good man, practical. He could teach you what real corporate technology looks like. Marcus Thompson. I knew Marcus well. He'd been one of the first people I'd met with when I started evaluating Pacific Industries as an acquisition target 6 months ago. He was indeed a good man, and he'd been incredibly helpful in explaining the company's technological infrastructure and inefficiencies. The salary wouldn't be amazing to start, Dad continued, but within 5 years, you could be making 6 figures. Real money, not whatever it is you're making now. Michael nodded approvingly. Dad's right. And once you're established in corporate IT, you could move around. Build a real career instead of this freelancing thing you're doing. It's not freelancing, I said, my patience finally wearing thin. I own a company. Sam, Emma said gently, having a business license and calling yourself a consultant doesn't make you a company owner. We're not trying to be mean, we're trying to help you see things clearly. The conversation was interrupted by the soft buzz of my phone. I glanced at the screen and saw Sarah Martinez, my executive assistant, calling. I almost declined the call, Family dinner was supposed to be phone-free time, but something made me hesitate. I should take this, I said, starting to stand. Absolutely not, Dad said firmly. It's your birthday dinner. Whatever computer emergency it is can wait. Dad, it might be important. More important than your family? Mom asked, her voice hurt. I sat back down, but my phone buzzed again. Then again. Sarah never called repeatedly unless it was urgent. When it buzzed a fourth time, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I'm sorry, but I really need to take this. I answered the phone before anyone could protest further. Sarah? What's going on? Ms. Carter, I'm so sorry to interrupt your birthday dinner, but I have incredible news. Sarah's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. The Pacific Industries merger is complete. All the paperwork went through, the board vote was unanimous, and the transfer of assets is finalized. Congratulations, you now officially own Pacific Industries. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. I could hear my family's conversations continuing around me, but their voices seemed distant and muffled, as if I was underwater. The entire acquisition? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Everything. All subsidiaries, all assets, all intellectual property. The previous shareholders have been paid out, and Carter Technologies now owns 100% of Pacific Industries. The announcement will go public first thing Monday morning. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. For the past 18 months, I had been quietly acquiring shares of Pacific Industries through various investment vehicles and shell companies. What had started as a small technology acquisition had evolved into a complete corporate takeover. What's the final valuation? I asked. $2.8 billion for the complete acquisition, plus another $400 million in assumed assets and intellectual property. The due diligence team estimates the total value at $3.2 billion. The number hit me like a physical blow. I had just become the owner of a $3.2 billion corporation. The same corporation where my father had worked for 30 years. The same corporation he just suggested I apply to for an entry-level position. Ms. Carter? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Sarah. We'll discuss the integration plans on Monday. Should I prepare a press release for your approval? I looked across the table at my father, who was still lecturing Michael about the importance of corporate stability and long-term thinking. In a few days, his former company would be announcing that it had been acquired by Carter Technologies. Eventually, he would learn that the mysterious owner of Carter Technologies was his daughter. The one he thought was wasting her life fixing computers. Not yet, I said. Give me until Monday to decide on the timing. Understood. And Miss Carter? Happy birthday. This is an incredible achievement. I hung up the phone and set it face down on the table, my hands trembling slightly. Across from me, my family continued their conversation as if nothing had changed, completely unaware that the course of their lives had just shifted dramatically. Sorry about that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Work emergency? Emma asked with a knowing look. See, this is what we mean. You can't even have dinner without being interrupted by some computer crisis. It wasn't a crisis, I said quietly. Then what was so important that it couldn't wait? Dad asked, his irritation clear. I took a deep breath. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for years had finally arrived. There was no more hiding, no more pretending to be something I wasn't. Dad, you mentioned Pacific Industries earlier. Yes. And I meant what I said. I can make some calls, set up an interview. That won't be necessary. He frowned. Samantha, I know you think you're too good for corporate work, but... Dad, I interrupted, my voice stronger now. I don't need an interview at Pacific Industries. I just bought the company. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade away as my family stared at me with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. What do you mean you bought the company? Mom asked slowly. I mean Carter Technologies. My company just completed the acquisition of Pacific Industries. The merger finalized 20 minutes ago. Michael was the first to find his voice. Sam, that's not possible. Pacific Industries is a massive corporation. It's worth billions. $3.2 billion to be exact. Dad's face had gone completely pale. Samantha, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. I pulled out my phone and opened the secure app that connected me to Carter Technologies' executive dashboard. Would you like to see the acquisition documents? The screen showed the real-time status of the merger. Complete. Below that were the financial details, the asset transfers, and the integration timeline that would begin Monday morning. Emma leaned over to look at the phone, her eyes widening as she scrolled through the information. This looks real. It is real. But how? Dad's voice trailed off as he struggled to process what he was hearing. The tech consulting business I've been running for the past 5 years? It evolved. I started by helping small businesses optimize their systems, then medium-sized companies, then large corporations. Eventually, I realized I could build better solutions from scratch than I could by fixing existing problems. I paused, watching their faces as they tried to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the reality sitting in front of them. So I started developing proprietary software, then acquiring smaller tech companies that complemented my solutions. Carter Technologies has been growing steadily for 3 years. This is our largest acquisition to date, but it's not our first. How large? Michael asked, his lawyer's mind automatically jumping to the financial implications. Before today, about $800 million in total assets. After today, just over $4 billion. The number seemed to physically impact Dad. He slumped back in his chair, staring at me as if I'd transformed into someone he'd never seen before. $4 billion, he repeated numbly. Give or take a few $100 million, depending on market fluctuations. Mom set down her wine glass with shaking hands. Samantha, if this is true, if you really own a company worth $4 billion, why didn't you tell us? It was the question I'd been dreading, because the answer revealed as much about them as it did about me. Because of conversations like this one, I said gently. Because every time I tried to share good news about my business, you found ways to diminish it. When I got my first major contract, you said it was probably a fluke. When I hired my first employees, you said I was getting ahead of myself. When I opened my first office, you asked when I was going to get serious about my future. Emma's eyes filled with tears. We were trying to protect you. I know. But the protection felt like criticism. And after a while it became easier to just not share. But living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. Mom gestured helplessly. Why? Because I like my apartment. It's convenient to my office, it's secure, and it meets my needs. And the car is reliable and doesn't attract attention. I learned early on that visible wealth creates complications I'd rather avoid. Dad was still staring at the phone screen, scrolling through acquisition documents that bore his daughter's signature as CEO and majority shareholder of Carter Technologies. The people I worked with, he said slowly. The managers, the executives, they were all reporting to you? Not directly. Pacific Industries will maintain its existing management structure, at least initially. But yes, ultimately they report to Carter Technologies, which means they report to me. Marcus Thompson is a good man who does excellent work. He'll be staying on, probably with a promotion and a significant raise. Dad looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something between awe and bewilderment. All those times I talked about Pacific Industries, about my career there, about the company culture and the management philosophy. I was taking notes, I admitted. Your insights were actually very helpful during the due diligence process. Michael laughed suddenly, a sharp, almost hysterical sound. Do you realize what this means? Sam is now Dad's boss. Technically, she's everyone's boss. I'm not anyone's boss, I corrected. Pacific Industries will continue operating as it always has. I'm not interested in micromanaging a company that's already successful. I'm interested in providing resources and technology that will help it become even more successful. But you could. Emma started, then stopped. I could what? You could fire people. Change policies. Restructure the entire company. I could, I agreed. But I won't. Pacific Industries works because of its people and its culture. I didn't buy it to change it. I bought it to grow it. The waiter appeared at our table, clearly sensing the tension but professionally ignoring it. Can I interest anyone in dessert? Perhaps some birthday cake for the young lady? We all stared at him for a moment as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. The idea of birthday cake seemed absurd in the context of what had just been revealed. Just the check, please, Dad said quietly. As the waiter retreated, we sat in silence for several long minutes. I could almost see my family members trying to reorganize their understanding of reality, to fit this new information into their existing worldview. The apartment, Mom said suddenly. The one you live in. How much does it cost? About $3,200 a month. That's not a poor person's apartment. No, it's not. It's a nice apartment in a good neighborhood. But it's not a penthouse and it doesn't scream wealth. It allows me to live comfortably without attracting attention. And the car. Cost me $18,000 3 years ago. It's reliable, efficient, and invisible. Perfect for my needs. Michael leaned forward, his expression intense. Sam, do you understand what you've just told us? You're not just successful, you're one of the richest people in the state. Possibly in the country. I understand the numbers, yes. No, I don't think you do. He pulled out his own phone and started typing. According to Forbes, a net worth of $4 billion would put you in the top 500 richest Americans. At 31 years old, you'd be one of the youngest billionaires in the country. The reality of it hit me as he said it. I'd been so focused on building the company, on solving problems and creating solutions, that I hadn't really considered the broader implications of my success. I don't need to be on any lists, I said quickly. It's not about what you need, Emma said, her voice strange. It's about what is. You're a billionaire, Sam. A billionaire who's been letting us lecture her about getting a real job. Dad finally looked up from my phone, which he'd been studying intently. The executive team listing shows you as CEO and founder. How long have you been running Carter Technologies? 5 years as CEO, 7 years total if you count the initial consulting phase. And you've been doing this alone? Not alone. I have an incredible team. Sarah, who called earlier, has been with me for 3 years. My CTO, David Park, is a genius who's revolutionized our entire technology stack. My CFO, Maria Santos, is the reason we've been able to manage this level of growth without losing our financial footing. But the decisions, the strategy, the vision, that's been you? Yes. Dad set my phone down carefully as if it might explode. Samantha, I owe you an apology. Dad. No, let me finish. His voice was thick with emotion. For years I've been treating you like a child who couldn't figure out how to be an adult. I've been condescending and dismissive and completely wrong about who you are and what you're capable of. Tears started flowing down Mom's cheeks. We all have. Oh, honey, we've been so unfair to you. You were trying to help, I said, though the words felt inadequate. We were trying to fix something that wasn't broken, Emma corrected. We were trying to force you into our definition of success instead of recognizing that you'd already achieved something far beyond what any of us have done. The check arrived and there was a moment of awkward confusion about who should pay. Under normal circumstances, Dad would have insisted on covering dinner. But normal circumstances no longer applied. I quietly handed the waiter my credit card before anyone could object. This is going to take some getting used to, Michael said as we gathered our coats. What is? Having a billionaire sister. Knowing that our baby sister is more successful than all of us combined. Success isn't a competition, I said gently. Maybe not, but it's still a fact. As we walked out of the restaurant together, Dad caught my arm. Samantha, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? Because all the money in the world doesn't matter if you're not happy. It was such a dad question, cutting straight to the heart of what really mattered. I thought about it seriously before answering. Yes, I said finally. I love what I do. I love building things, solving problems, creating solutions that help people and businesses thrive. I love my team, I love the challenges, and I love knowing that the work we do makes a real difference. And personally, relationships, social life, all of that. I smiled. I'm working on it. Turns out building a billion-dollar company takes up a lot of time. But you'll make time now? For family, for yourself. I'll try. Especially for family. We reached our cars and there was an awkward moment where no one seemed to know how to say goodbye. Everything had changed in the span of a single phone call, and we were all still figuring out what that meant. Can we? Mom started then stopped. Would you mind if we told people? I mean, not strangers but family, friends, the neighbors? We've been so worried about you for so long and now? Now you want to brag, I said with a small smile. Maybe a little, she admitted. Is that terrible? It's human. But can you wait until Monday? I'd like to coordinate the public announcement with my PR team. You have a PR team? I have several teams, Mom. It's a big company. Dad pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. I'm proud of you, he whispered in my ear. I've always been proud of you, but I was too worried to show it properly. I know, Dad. I love you too. As I drove home in my 10-year-old Honda, I reflected on the evening's events. The revelation I'd been dreading for years had finally happened, and while it was overwhelming, it was also liberating. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be completely honest with my family about who I was and what I'd built. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Thank you for not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. Then one from Michael, my baby sister the billionaire. This is going to take some getting used to, but I'm proud of you. And finally one from Dad, can't wait to see what you build next. Also, Marcus Thompson is going to die when he finds out who his new boss really is. I laughed out loud at that last one. Monday was going to be very interesting indeed. As I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage, I realized that everything had changed and nothing had changed. I was still the same person who loved solving problems and building solutions. I still drove the same car and lived in the same apartment. But now, for the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend to be smaller than I was. Tomorrow I would wake up as the CEO of a $4 billion technology company. But tonight I was just Samantha Carter celebrating her 31st birthday and finally being seen by her family for who she really was. It was the best birthday present I could have asked for.